Welcome to The Market Makers. I'm your host, Jon Pertchik, CEO of ANDMORE. If you aspire to build your business, to scale your brand, to build your network, or to figure out what's about to trend, this is your podcast. Each week, I talk with creative and business superstars from the world of design, furniture, lifestyle, and home. Together, we explore the beginnings, breakthroughs, and big reveals, the full arc of transformation. You'll hear how today's leaders turn ideas into impact, setbacks into strategy, and creative sparks into enduring success. Today, my guest is Thom Filicia. You might know Thom as one of the original members of the Emmy Award-winning show Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. Since then, Thom has become one of the most respected interior and product designers in the world. From working at iconic firms like Parish-Hadley and Robert Metzger to launching his own brand and showroom in the New York Design Center, Thom is a masterclass in creative longevity. So here's what I want to know. What set him up for success? What moment shaped his path? And how does he continue evolving and staying fresh in a constantly shifting industry?
I would make a lot of private mistakes before I would get to this is definitely what I should be doing. And then I would be like, okay, this is what I did. But I didn't advertise the amount of times I was like, I don't think I'm doing this right.
In our conversation, we talk about Thom's early inspirations, how a stuck elevator helped him go from designer to TV star, and how he uses markets to keep in touch with what trends are next in the industry. Well, your career path would certainly suggest that you like to do many, many different things and take on lots of challenges.
Yes.
Maybe share with me, how do you go from, Syracuse, New York to Queer Eye, Jackie Wood, having Sedgwick and Gradle, Home Collection, Thom Filicia Inc., big time, famous designer. How does that happen? Where does that begin?
I mean, it actually started in Syracuse, New York.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, that's where it started. I mean, I was, as a kid growing up, I was really interested in architecture and design. And I lived in an area that was kind of a 1920s kind of really great old neighborhood with really beautiful examples of Georgian, Spanish colonial, Dutch colonial, and Tudor, and all of those kinds of houses. And then I just was interested in architecture as a kid. I was interested in furniture and all of the things that kind of went along with that. I loved cars and boats and anything that was design. And then my dad taught me how to draft. I was in an advanced art class in elementary school and kind of stayed in that lane through middle school and high school. And then I took drafting classes and architecture classes when I was in high school and just started going in that sort of direction. But at the same time, building a portfolio so that I could start looking at art schools as opposed to just going into more traditional collegiate program like liberal arts or something. I knew I wanted more of a university kind of environment or college experience than just an art school experience. And when I went to visit students in their studios, for whatever reason, when I went to the interior design department, everything that they had on their walls was like, okay, this is everything I like. Like there were furniture plans, floor plans, there was architecture, there was furniture, there were textiles, there was lighting. There was a lot of the things I liked. Whereas when I went into the industrial design program, there were dog cages and skis and a car. And then there was a crib. And so there were things that I was I don't know if that's exactly what I'm interested in, but I think it's cool that they're doing that. But it wasn't exactly my thing. And then when I went into the architecture school, it felt a little bit more rigid or restricted for me than the design programs did. The design programs felt more like people were on the ground kind of building things and playing with objects and ideas, whereas architecture was very cerebral and a little bit more conceptual, and it felt like there was a big distance between me and what we were talking about, whereas the design school felt like I could pick everything up and look at it and feel it and think about it and sit on it or lay next. You know what I mean? You felt like you could participate with it. And so it felt more human to me and it felt more connected to what I was thinking and feeling. And then also when I started talking to the students, there was even a conversation that was more fluid. I would even say things like, what are you guys doing this weekend? And the architects were absolutely nothing because we never leave our studio. I was like, that might not work for me.
Yeah.
When I spoke to the design students, they were like, we're hungover from being out last night. And I was like, okay, this is starting to seem like a language I can speak. So I just was like, even thinking about what I was going to be doing in college and like how I was going to be able to participate with college. I was like, I didn't want to lose out on that. So I kind of knew that that was my space. And then I interned for Parish-Hadley in New York City when I was a junior in college. And I interned for them for a summer between my junior and my senior year. And then they hired me out of school. So I ended up working for them in New York, which was great. And then from there, I worked for Robert Metzger. And I also moonlighted for Ellen Tinksley and other designers that were friends with designers I was working with. And then I worked with Jeffrey Bill Huber, and I was a senior designer there. And I was there for about 4 years or 3.5, 4 years, something like that. And then I went off on my own.
I love your distinctions between sort of, you were talking as a younger person about industrial design versus, architecture is a little more cerebral and maybe rigid versus interior design, where it's much more connected to the outcome, the creative and the outcome were sort of at a more human scale. It's super interesting. Mind if I go back for a second? You said your dad taught you drafting.
Yeah.
Was your dad an architect or a designer or an engineer?
No, my dad was actually an engineer. He was an engineer. So, that was part of his world at a certain level. And that's what he did when he was younger. And so I think, like, if I would go visit him at his office, I would see like scaled rulers and all that stuff around. And I didn't know what they were. And I was interested. And I just was like, whenever I see someone using a pencil and a ruler, to me, that's like, what are you doing? What's that? What does that mean? And so that was interesting to me, even though I think what my dad was doing with it was not in my wheelhouse. Engineering or electrical or whatever they were dealing with, components and motors and stuff was not my thing. But I was definitely interested in sort of taking those tools and using them for the things I was interested in.
So I have to ask you about this one thing. I read your first job, which you mentioned earlier at Parish-Hadley. Did you actually call from a payphone and call one of the principals? Is that a true story or no? Or something like that?
No, I didn't call from a payphone. No. I was living in an apartment with two of my best friends, and I was calling different design firms to see if they were taking interns. But I did call Albert Hadley and say that I was Thom Filicia from Syracuse University. And I didn't say student. I just said from Syracuse University. So I think he might have thought he was getting an honorary degree or something to that effect. And then when he got onto the phone, I sort of dropped the bomb that I was a student and I was looking for an internship. And he was really cool and very receptive and couldn't have been more lovely, and scheduled a time for me to come and meet with him. And I did. And we had a great interview. And he called me the next day and said, we'd love for you to be one of our 3 interns for the summer. And so it was a really cool experience because it was definitely my first choice. And I was very concerned that, I didn't know if I was going to get any of my internships that I was hoping to get. But I got my first choice literally the next day. I was like, I wonder what's going to happen. And the phone rang. And I was like, what? And it was a really cool sort of place to be, not only because of working with the people I was working with, but just having access to the books that were there and the environment, and to sort of see the way that they were doing things. And, there were times I would go in early or stay late. I was helping with stuff for a book. So I was going through and looking at all photographs of years and years of work. And the names that you would see on things like Getty, Roosevelt, Paley, all these iconic names that you kind of heard growing up, the photos of the Getty's pool house, okay, or the Paley's living room. So it was just interesting to be able to have that become wait, this is normal at some level. But,
that definitely set a high bar. Yeah.
I had imposter syndrome the entire time I was there, but it was terrifying. I was it was a combination of fear and excitement and accomplishment at the same time, I have to say, because getting that to happen was okay, this happened. You know what I mean? So it trains you to think that things that you don't think maybe can happen, you can maybe make happen. And also, if you're willing to fall down and pick yourself up and figure it out, I would make a lot of private mistakes before I would get to this is definitely what I should be doing. And then I would be like, okay, this is what I did. But I didn't advertise the amount of times I was like, I don't think I'm doing this right.
I love the reference to imposter syndrome. Well, that nothing could have proven out more wrong in the long run than what you achieved from that humble beginning. Something I'm noticing is that none of this came quickly for Thom. His success was not an overnight win. It was years of curiosity, sketching, drafting, trying things out, and sometimes getting it wrong. But through all of that, he carried this strong sense of who he was and what path felt right for him. That confidence, even as a student, helped him stick to his vision and build a strong foundation for everything that came later. And that next stage starts in the most unlikely of places.
Television was totally different. I was stuck in an elevator with a bunch of other people in my office building in Soho. And I ended up helping a woman who was having a panic attack. And she was like, oh my God, I can't believe we're stuck in this elevator and I have bad news. I'm claustrophobic. And I was like, well, I've got real bad news. My dog has to go out. And if you don't get off the floor, he's going to probably pee on you. So we just kind of created this light moment with all of that and kept her organized and not panicking. And then a talent agent that was in the elevator, she asked me, what I did. And she said, are you a comedian? I said, no, I'm an interior designer. And so that was it. That's kind of how I ended up.
Wow.
She introduced me to Queer Eye like 3 or 4 months later. And that's how television jumped into my world.
Wow.
She was like, I think you might be good on TV based on what I saw in the elevator. And you're fun, you're lighthearted. I looked at your work and your work is really great. I think maybe this would be a good fit. So that's kind of how that happened, which was awesome and interesting and very unexpected. And then Sedgwick and Brattle, the showroom is actually the corner I grew up on in Syracuse. And so I think it's all very intertwined. I don't think any one thing is not part of the other thing. They all kind of support each other, and just being interested in what you're doing, loving what you're doing, being passionate about what you're doing. When I was a young kid, I was like, there was not a party I didn't go to. There was not an event I didn't go to. I was, reading every magazine. I was reading like every book that came out about every designer. And I just, was really interested in my space. So I think I was like a design nerd. So that's what kind of fueled me. And I think that with that sort of interest and the passion and being motivated, I think all of those things kind of all overlapped together.
Right. I mean, it's interesting. A couple of my favorite cliches, you love what you do. You never work a day in your life, finding that passion.
Yeah.
And the other one is, well, it's easy to think, oh, you just got lucky. You had your elevator audition, quote, the stuck elevator trick, right? It's, another favorite cliche is the harder you work, the luckier you get. You put yourself in positions, not that you put yourself in that stuck elevator, but you're just of a certain mindset.
No, I did. I mean, look, I was renting an office in a building in Soho, and it's like I had a design firm, and I was, I wasn't like I just happened to be in that elevator because I was, it's like all of those things kind of overlap on each other.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? If I decided to go home from work early that day, I wouldn't have been in the elevator. I stayed late. I was working. I was really passionate about what I was doing. I was trying to get my work done. And it was a Friday night. I could have left much earlier. And I chose to be there. And that's how I ended up in that situation.
And how many times did you stay late and have those habits that you didn't have that moment happen? You do those habits enough times, and that's where that kind of quote unquote luck thing comes in. It's not really luck. It's having those right habits and caring about what you're doing and doing that over and over again. And eventually the wind will blow something your way and you happen to be there because you're sort of in it. That's a great story.
And not only that, but like the wind blows your way, but you not only happen to be there, but you also have the credentials and the ability to jump in and do what is needed to be done. I mean, things can present themselves, but you have to be in a position where you have the ability to recognize it, also have the ability to actually participate, jump in and do it. And also keep in mind, it was in an industry that I know nothing about, that was going to be talking about an industry that I knew a lot about. So I had to also be willing to say to myself, like, I don't know anything about this, but I'm sure I can figure it out.
I love that. I think that's something we can all probably relate to. That mindset of just having to overcome fear, jump in and figure things out. We've all been there. The beauty is that when you face the unknown and go after something meaningful, Not only do you gain confidence, but also the deepest sense of satisfaction. This experience of overcoming fear and willingness to confront the unknown is where personal growth comes from. In Thom's case, this became the stage for his greatest projects. The types of design that you've pursued, whether TV, residential, hotel, different areas, maybe share what first comes to mind, sort of the biggest, most daunting, scariest project you would undertake of any category. And on the other side of that, maybe the most satisfying.
I mean, I remember years ago, I did the World's Fair in Aichi, Japan. That was very scary because it was so far away from home and the language barrier. And then also just like, how are we going to build this and how are we going to get it there? And it had to represent sort of the American experience. And I wanted it to be fresh and modern and cool, but also be something that had a reference of history in a cool, fresh, different way. So that was a really cool project. And it kind of really set the tone for me that like, look, if you really love what you're doing, you can kind of work anywhere. You can work with people that speak a different language and very far away from home, and you can get things to be beautiful and get them done and make it amazing. I loved the way it came out. It was scary. It definitely was scary. I was like, what? How am I going to do this? And it was like the government. I was like, government? That sounds scary already. Yeah. And then Japan and like Aichi, Japan. And then it was on the land that Toyota owned. And it was something that had to be there and then it would go away. So it had to be completely environmentally friendly for the land. So it was a really interesting project. And I think anytime you take on a new project with new, interesting people, it's a journey and it can be scary a little bit, but you just have to say, okay, we're going to jump in and we're going to make it amazing.
I love that philosophy. So Thom, you engage with markets quite a bit, I guess, with retailers and designers. How do you engage with markets?
Yeah, so I'm at a variety of markets. I do High Point. I'm in Vegas. I'm in Atlanta. We do Dallas, Interwoven. So I go to a lot of different markets. And when I'm there, I'm also very often representing a few of the brands that we work with. Like, for example, at High Point, we're always showing our furniture with Vanguard in our Vanguard showroom in the Vanguard building, which at that showroom, we have our rugs. We also have our artwork, our lighting, our textiles. We'll have our bedding. So it can be an overlap of product. But then when you go to our other showrooms like Eastern Accents and Cyan and Cravat and Wendover Art, all of these different vendors that we work with have showrooms at the various markets. So some of them, like Fazy, our rug partner, will have product at High Point and of course at Dallas and sometimes in Atlanta. So I will go to different markets for different launches and different things like that. But what I really like is not only representing the products that we're designing for the partners that we have, but I'm also connecting with the people, the designers that are coming and the architects that are coming through and really talking about what they're looking for, what they're excited about, what markets they're liking, what's the energy on the street, what are they feeling, what do they think is exciting in the world, what do they think is missing. So it's a really great time for a design community to connect and get to know each other, hear about what's going on in different regions, hear about what they think about what you're doing and what they're liking, because what you're hearing from the design community might be different than what you're hearing from buyers, might be different than what you're hearing from the manufacturers. And also, helps really give you clarity on what you're thinking as a product designer, as a designer, and just as a creative person. It's just creating that dialogue and having that open forum, I think is really awesome.
So it's more than just a shopping opportunity for customers. It's maybe that too, but you're really connecting with the community and listening and hearing what others are thinking and where they're heading, and sort of that somehow has an impact on you.
Yeah, you're seeing what's happening in the design industry from a product standpoint, but you're also all of the people that support all of that and that are interested in all of that also have a lot of information and ideas. And that dialogue is really important. I mean, I go to KBIS, I will be doing the casual markets. So I really like to sort of dive in, know what's going on, know what's out there, know what's exciting, know what's not exciting, know what's about to happen, what did happen, what should happen. And also just connecting with the people that make it happen and the people that are interested in knowing what's going on in that facet of design. So I find it fascinating and informative. I think it's fun. I'm generally connecting with a lot of people I know and that I've made friends with over the years. And so it's a good balance of information, ideas, and experience, and jumping into the world of design and products. It's cool. I like it.
That's awesome. I mean, one of the interesting things I've learned in the short time I've been here is, at High Point, there was a time where there were signs that said no designers. And I just find that fascinating because now every major manufacturer, every major tenant of ANDMORE's is looking to figure out how they can be more meaningful and attractive to designers to encourage them to market. And that's a big priority for the company too.
Yeah, it's really interesting that it has become such a designer-driven market. And I think also it's just changing the experience of market, because market now needs to be prettier, sexier, more fun. The food needs to be better. The hotels need to be better. Everything needs to be better because you're appealing to the design world, and it needs to be a design experience at some level. And I think there's been a very slow transition into that space, but I think it's going to start to speed up because I think everyone's starting to realize that the design community is really not only a great springboard for all of those designs and all of those products, but I just think it holds the product community and the manufacturers up to a higher standard. And I think that it's better for the end user, it's better for the showrooms, it's better for the stores, it's better for the clients, it's better for designers, it's better for the industry as a whole.
Well, we need to keep doing better and better. Well, thanks again for all the time today, Thom. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. This has been fun.
I look forward to doing it again. What stands out most in Thom's story is one word: authenticity. From the creativity he embraced as a child, to the way he chose the kind of student he wanted to be, to landing one of the biggest breaks of his career while stuck in an elevator. And that same thread continues today in the products and spaces Thom designs. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Market Makers. I've been your host, Jon Pertchik, signing off for now. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure you're following the show wherever you get your podcasts, and join us each week as we uncover more stories of transformation from the people shaping how we live, work, and gather.